520 years ago, the world was in great turmoil because the law of energy was changed, and the technological civilization based on the original energy system instantly collapsed. All kinds of terrible beasts put humanity on the brink of extinction. But fortunately, energy is restored in the form of heavenly and earthly life force. Ancient practice and martial arts have become hope for the survival of mankind. Currently, at the Seniao Heilun base at the Martial Arts Academy, a male trainer standing in front of several guys shouting told them that in order to develop martial arts, you need to know the basics. Only by tempering yourself with thousands of fights and constantly overcoming the limits of your capabilities, you can become a martial arts master. And now he will teach them to explain in detail 18 forms of forging, and they should be repeated after him, because this is the first foundation. Having said that, the coach took a pose where the knees were slightly bent, with the hands in front and the palms were clenched into a fist. Repeating after him, one of the students, exhaling, said that why start with such an elementary thing. Another student standing next to that guy also said that he learned it from his father when he was 4 years old. Another student added that it was such a waste of time. Hearing their words, the coach clenched his fist harder and called them little bastards to himself. But as soon as he thought about it, he immediately noticed a guy standing behind everyone, and who was repeating after the coach with all seriousness. After seeing him, the coach thought that his name was Feng Yun. He was born an orphan, and he had never practiced martial arts, so that's why he was so serious. But it's a pity that in his case it's useless. After such thoughts, the coach loudly shouted out loud to all the students, calling them little bastards, said that they would be serious about entering the first grade, and if they do not want to study the 18 exercises, then they can just do 118 push-ups. Hearing his words, all the students apologized to him at once. Feng Yun continued to train, and seeing this, the coach thought that he had neither strength nor skill, and he did not want him to die when he became a warrior. Having finished thinking about it, the coach continued to loudly tell his students that the main point of the last basis of the distribution of the center of gravity, and also his students can take a break and practice freely for half an hour, and if they have any questions, they can ask them to him, and then they can finish classes. The coach showed his students the necessary movements, and the students tried to repeat after him. Feng Yun also tried hard to think about what he should do faster and faster, and the teacher teaches too fast, so fast that he cannot remember all this, and the effect of this technique is weak. Where is the manifestation of his strength? That's right, it's not there, because having been reborn from the earth of the 21st century to the earth in this parallel world, he turned from an adult into a 14-year-old teenager. And one day when he was walking on his way to work, the mirror pendant on his neck suddenly lit up, and he inexplicably passed through it. Although in his previous life he was a fan of martial arts, he cannot use his energy in this world, and Kung Fu is completely useless. Even if he got into the Academy of Arts, he will only be able to teach the 18 basics that children can do. In other words, it is a classic, the gymnastics of the martial arts world, and relying on this, he would only be able to reach the peak of martial arts in 1,000 or 800 years. Thinking about this, Feng Yun heard the screams of his classmates, who looked at the guy walking past them and shouted in admiration that it was Lin Qiang from the advanced class, the first day of the Aquamarine Academy. And 2 days ago he passed the martial arts master exam and was admitted to Xiniao University in the city center. Others began to shout in the same surprise that it was impossible, because he was only 19 years old. Another one shouted that he was the only child in the family, and was born with a golden spoon in his mouth, and he has a good experience. Feng Yun saw Lin Qiang and thought that he had heard that when he was 13, he would not reach the level of this guy yet, and he was about to be kicked out of the academy. As soon as Lin Qiang started walking near Feng Yun, and Feng Yun was staring at him intently, the mirror that was around his neck started to glow, and Feng Yun heard a voice saying that the control was carried out, and his mirror space was built, and the function of the infinite projection mirror was also turned on. As soon as Feng Yun found himself in an unknown space, a system window appeared in front of him asking if Lin Qiang had been selected and if he was sure. To which Feng Yun replied uncertainly that he was sure. After his answer, a mirror appeared brightly in front of him, in which Lin Qiang was. Coming closer to the mirror, Feng Yun stretched out his hand into it to touch, asked himself what is his strength. Suddenly, through the same mirror, someone began to come out, and pushing Feng Yun's hand away, so that he would not touch the mirror, told him not to touch it. Removing his hand, Feng Yun abruptly responded positively to her, but the girl came out of the mirror, and told Feng Yun again that he would not touch the mirror with dirty hands. Already completely out of the mirror, the girl put her hands on her waist and continued to tell Feng Yun that this is common sense in life. To which Feng Yun replied that he thought this situation was contrary to common sense. Feng Yun wanted to continue, but the girl called him by name and greeted him, saying that he was in a mirror space, and she was the embodiment of an infinite projection mirror, and he could call him Miss Xiaojing. Feng Yun scratched his head and told her that he would just call her Jin, and could she explain the situation to him first. Jin replied to him that, as the name implies, this is a world created by an infinite projection mirror in your mind, and he should look here. Speaking of this, Jin was showing his reflection, which unfortunately was pathetic and ridiculous. And when Feng Yun looked into his own reflection, Jin continued to say that this was his current data. As soon as she said that, letters appeared at the bottom of the mirror that were written about Feng Yun. The owner of the mirror, Feng Yun, his age is 14 years old, is in the realm of ordinary people. His talent is missing, exercises, 18 basics, note no, martial arts are missing. Weapons are also missing, and props too missing. Seeing his face in the reflection, Feng Yun with a stony face said Jing. In order to take care of his face, she put a mosaic on him, and now he does not know how to thank her. Jing, not paying attention to his words, said showing Lin Kang's reflection that this is Lin Kang's data projected just now as the first object of projection. His choice is not bad. Also at the bottom of the mirror appeared words that meant that his name is Lin Kang. His age is 19 years old. He also has a cultivation base, a junior martial artist, methods of fighting exercises of the first order exercises with a turtle and a snake, martial arts of the first order sword slashing technique, an alloy sword, a set of alloy armor, yiping power, blood kai power, low-grade gold talent, ordinary clothes, and so on. After reading all this, Feng Yun thoughtfully said that how this picture can cause a feeling of deja vu, is it a coincidence? To which Jing replied that of course this is what he will throw if he defeats him here, although it is unlikely. After hearing her words, Feng Yun asked her again, isn't this a normal game, with strange explosive equipment? Jing told him that now that she understood who he was, they should start a battle. When Jing was answering Feng Yun, Lin Kang was slowly getting out of the mirror, and as soon as he got out, he immediately got into an attack position. Seeing his actions, Feng Yun stopped him by shouting that they should wait a minute, because he still has 2 questions. Jing immediately told him what he would ask. Feng Yun hurriedly asked her what she had just said, that it was all in his mind, so what about his body now? To which Jing replied with a smile that it was probably in some kind of stupor, but in any case, he looks dumbfounded, and in the future it would be better for him to get used to using not only one mind, but 2. After hearing this, Feng Yun, with all seriousness on his face, asked the second question about whether he would die if he lost the battle. Jing replied to him that of course he did not die, because it was just a battle that would happen in his mind. Although the experience would be like death, and the pain of death would not pass at all, that life was worse than death. After hearing her answer, Feng Yun asked her with fear and a cry that wasn't it even worse. Jing, not quite turning away from Feng Yun, told him that it was actually possible to reduce the difficulty, and it also complies with the rules to lower the level of development of the strong to ordinary people like him. In any case, no one here will say that he is a coward. After such words, Feng Yun, disappointed, told her what her expression meant then. But still, he should forget about it, because he did not want to experience the feeling of death, so they should lower his power base a little. As soon as he said that, Feng Yun heard an old voice behind him that was familiar to him and telling him that this was not normal. Looking back, Feng Yun saw his grandfather playing computer games with him, telling him that a man could not choose an easy path. Feng Yun replied to him that this game was too complicated. Before he could finish his sentence, Grandpa interrupted him, saying that if he chose a simple mode, he would miss a lot of fun. After hearing these words, Feng Yun himself happily told himself that he also thinks that simple mode is very boring to play. When he said this to himself, Jing, who was showing him all this with a mustache on her face, spoke the same way as that grandfather, so that he would give up his cowardly side and go on the road and sacrifice his blood to this land. After hitting her on the head, Feng Yun agreed to her adventure, saying that it was not necessary to just give people fictional memories, so she should immediately reduce Lin Kang's cultivation base to the level of ordinary people. After receiving a good blow to the head, Jing agreed with him. But after telling him that even if his cultivation base is the same as his, he is still much stronger than him. Does he want to know how many times he died before the end of the class? Feng Yun did not answer her question, but instead turned back to Lin Kang and thought to himself that he did not want to die even once. But as soon as Feng Yun saw Lin Kang with a sword in his hands and in an attack pose, Feng Yun again wondered to himself that this guy was still holding a sword. Lin Qiang, seeing that Feng Yun was ready, immediately attacked him, shouting the word to attack, smashing sword, dasheng. Starting to run away from him very quickly, Feng Yun shouted that he had been deceived. Jing, looking at all this, with a satisfied smile on her face, said that she forgot to tell him that the scene in the mirror space could be transformed, although she should forget about it, and it's better to see what he would choose. Thinking about this, Jing snapped her finger and shouted the words forest, and Feng Yun abruptly found himself in the forest. From surprise, Feng Yun was greatly surprised and therefore crashed into a tree. But as soon as he saw that Lin Qiang continued to run after him waving his sword, Feng Yun quickly regained consciousness and began to run away again. Hiding behind a tree, Feng Yun, out of breath, began to think that sooner or later, everything would end if he ran away like that. So he had to fight back, but this guy who could kill him at any moment. Seeing his inaction, Jing Poya laughed in the air and asked Feng Yun that he had finally calmed down. It's better to set him on him now than to let him beat to death in reality. Feng Yun, having started running away from Lin Qiang again, continued to think that even though he was running away all the time, the instinct of self-preservation also gradually ran through. It should be normal to be in a hopeless situation with the opponent for at least half an hour, and the opponent is dressed in heavy alloy swearing, so he should be exhausted before him, right? Although, he can't bet on it. Maybe his stamina is still stronger than him, and he needs to think in a different direction. With his attack power, it's impossible to break through the alloy armor, and he can only find the weak points of the armor to attack. Thinking about this, Feng Yun abruptly jumped to the top and pulled his leg forward and headed for Lin Qiang. But Lin Qiang was able to dodge with ease. After landing on the ground, Feng Yun started running away again, thinking that it was wrong. He was able to avoid his attack, as well as lose the ability to control. The right way should be to rotate his body in the direction with his attack power, and he attacks his upper body and head with a swing of the sword. So this guy's weakness, the fact that he lacks combat experience, what made him stronger than these children in his past life, is that he spent a lot of time training in real combat. But these children spend a lot of time and resources on strengthening their bodies and laying the foundations. Although Lin Qiang's quality is really strong, he still lives longer than him. With these thoughts, Feng Yun attacked Lin Qiang by grabbing his legs and putting them on the ground, and after pressing on his chest with his foot so that Lin Qiang could not stand up, Feng Yun picked up a huge stone and lifting it up told Lin Qiang that he would excuse him, but he would still win this battle. With these words, Feng Yun defeated Lin Qiang. Seeing this, Jing descended to the ground and looking at Feng Yun said that he really won. Looking at his performance at the very beginning, she did not think that he could win. Feng Yun asked her, saying that he put so much effort into it, and nothing fell off, right? To which Jing replied with a smile, so that he would be sure, with the first kill of each projection opponent, the probability of falling is 100%. Hearing her words, Feng Yun asked her in surprise, is it really? If so, that's great. Jing, with a cute facial expression and blowing kisses to Feng Yun, told him that his first reward was a kiss from this mirror. Feng Yun turned away from her and said with displeasure that he would leave a bad review. After his words, Jing immediately told him that she was just joking with him. Having said that, Jing made a serious and at the same time joyful face, flew up to the top and calling Feng Yun by name said that the first kill was done very well, and the reward for the execution is exercise of the first order exercises with a turtle and a snake. After receiving the turtle and snake exercises award, Feng Yun picked her up and asked Jing, is this the turtle and snake forging of the first level? Isn't it better than those 18 forms of forging that everyone practices? To which Jing replied to him, showing him a sign with her hand that everything was fine, so that he would be calm, because her price on the market is 30,000 yuan, and how does he think she is comparable to that free garbage? And if he says the word accept, he will immediately study her. After listening to her, Feng Yun immediately shouted the word accept, and at that moment, unbeknownst to him, his breathing changed. His voice seemed ancient, as if from a dormant turtle, as if from a snake slumbering in the depths of silt for 1,000 years. After a couple of minutes, Feng Yun took a deep breath, sharply hit the air, and after feeling something in himself, joyfully shouted that his strength and blood kai had increased. Jing smiled at him and said that it only seemed to him, because he had just learned this technique, and how could he become stronger if he had never cultivated it? And now he needs to relax and unfocus so he can return to the real world, and that's where he needs to cultivate his strength diligently. Feng Yun did as Jing said, but as soon as he opened his eyes in reality, he immediately saw his coach's displeased face very close. Shouting that he was a ghost, Feng Yun quickly moved away from him, but not keeping his balance in his legs. he still fell. The coach, looking at him, asked what was wrong with him, and was he going to go to lunch. Feng Yun immediately replied to him with a smile that he was just practicing. The thoughtful coach again told him that the teachers had a sudden meeting in the afternoon, so he could go as a lady. Hearing his words, Feng Yun quickly got up from the ground and started running towards the door, happily thanked the coach. The teacher, exhaling, asked himself, why should he work so hard now? The front line is broken and resources need to be saved, and an extraordinary exam date will be set for the meeting. And if Feng Yun does not pass, he will be expelled. Returning home, Feng Yun was squeezed by a very large crowd, and slowly walking along the road, Feng Yun asked himself to himself, what is this bullshit? And why are there so many people? Half an hour later, having already reached the dawn shelter, Feng Yun, standing next to the building, thought that this is where he will live now, this is his home, and what could be better than a big family. While Feng Yun was looking at the shelter, someone noticed him coming out and calling him by name asked why he came back so early. Did he do something? And he was sent as a lady. After calling the girl Xiao Lan and correcting his hairstyle, and being embarrassed, Feng Yun answered her by asking when he had such a thing. It was just that the teachers had a sudden meeting, so they let her go early. But why did she come back so early too? Xiao Lan told him that their homeroom teacher's son had died on the front line, and therefore they were released early. Watching their conversations, Jing poured herself tea with the help of magic and said that this girl is his childhood sweetheart. And she is not bad looking, although not as beautiful as she is. After going inside the shelter, Feng Yun immediately asked Xiao Lan if there was anything edible. Otherwise he didn't even have lunch. Wearing an apron, Xiao Lan turned to Feng Yun with a smile on her face and told him that she had just bought meat yesterday, so she would cook his favorite pig stew and they would celebrate his first day at the academy. After a while, when everything was ready, Feng Yun started eating the pig stew with pleasure, saying that it was delicious. Seeing Feng Yun eating the stewed pig with pleasure, Xiao Lan happily clapped her hand and said that she had learned her last lesson. She replaced the hot pepper for the meat with pepper for the same, and it turned out well. Feng Yun immediately forced a smile and asked her, what else is for the same and for meat? To which Xiao Lan only laughed. Watching their meal, Jing, looking at them in the mirror, viciously shouted that she also wanted to try. And if Feng Yun is a real man, he will eat all the pepper, how angry she is. Then, with the help of a magic remote control, Jing turned off the mirror through which she looked at Feng Yun and Xiao Lan. After that, Jing uttered the words, oh, out of the evil eye, out of the heart, how she wants to get out of this place into the real world. The next day, Feng Yun fought with Lin Kang again, and watching their fight, Jing asked Feng Yun dissatisfied that he really didn't eat enough pork stew. He needs to fight harder. To which Feng Yun viciously replied with a question about how she knew that he had eaten pork stew. After receiving no response, Feng Yun continued to fight, and as soon as the fight was over, he started it again. And so it went on 81 times. A tired Feng Yun, sitting on the ground, shouted that his current score was 24 victories and 57 deaths, and once they fought for so long that they came to a draw, and how many times he died. But anyway, he is an ordinary strong man with a weapon. After his words, Jing turned away from him, slightly joyfully told him that seeing how well he was doing, she decided to slightly raise Lin Kang's strength to the pre-master of the initial rank. Hearing her words, Feng Yun jumped off the ground and asked her in an angry voice, what does she think is called slightly? It's better for her not to be self-willed anymore. Does she even know how painful it is to die? Abruptly turning to him, Jing just as viciously asked him who is to blame that he is so weak. Does he really think that he is just loot grinding here, like in a game? And does he really not think that it would be better to raise his cultivation? Calling her a fool, Feng Yun continued to quarrel with her, saying and asking that she at least understands how much you need to cultivate to break through to a new level. So he first wants to knock the pill out of him, and only then start cultivating. To which Jing replied with a calm voice that he had already knocked out these pills. Feng Yun immediately asked her again about it, and when did he knock them out? Jing used magic to summon the bottle, while telling Feng Yun that he was so passionate about the battles that he didn't even pay attention to her alerts. Feng Yun replied to her that she had not sent any notifications on purpose, but what else is this? Putting one hand on her waist and holding the bottle with the other, Jing replied that it was a bottle of first-class medicine blood kai, and there were 10 pills in it. The market value of each was 3,000 yuan, and this should be enough for him to break through to the level of a pre-master of the initial rank. The blood kai pills, made from a mixture of more than a dozen precious medicines, contains primordial kai and is the initial and most commonly used pill for cultivation. After giving the pill to Feng Yun, Jing told him that she recommended that he find a deserted place so that no one would disturb him and take the pill to cultivate turtle and snake tempering. After taking the pill and starting to look at it, Feng Yun asked that for 24 victories he had knocked out just this, to which Jing replied to him, sipping clothes, that he still had ordinary clothes, but they were too big for him. Beaming in his eyes, Feng Yun took the clothes, saying that he would also take them and sell them. At the same time, Xiao Lan was standing near Feng Yun's door, eavesdropping on him, thinking that yesterday he did not have dinner, and today he did not have breakfast either, although she heard that it was impossible to disturb during cultivation. But what to do? She was worried. At the same moment, the doors of the room abruptly opened, and leaving there, Feng Yun thought with an unimportant look that this would not work. In the future he would need to allocate time for cultivation every day, otherwise he grinded all night. And whether it was necessary to establish measures to prevent dependence on online games, for example, will be limited only 5 fights a day. Although he just needs to control himself, and it looks like Jing can see the real world through his eyes, so he will need to close them while taking a bath, and then they will see how she will peek at him. Having finished thinking about it, Feng Yun called Jing a fool and shouted into space that she would give him some personal space. Thinking that he was telling her, Xiao Lan almost tearfully replied to him that he would forgive her. Surprised by what he heard, Feng Yun abruptly turned around and saw Xiao Lan, questioningly called her name. To which Xiao Lan tearfully replied to him that she didn't want to bother him, she was just worried about him. Feng Yun immediately began to nervously deny telling her that he had said it, not to her, but to no one at all, but to himself. Hearing his words, Xiao Lan smiled and told him that she was just joking, and it was time for him to go to class. And since he didn't have time to have breakfast, she packed for him so that he would definitely eat everything. Feng Yun also kindly smiled and agreed with her, while thinking to himself that it seems that he and the original owner of this body were close. When he reached the abandoned park, into the inner city, looking around, Feng Yun thought that this was a great place. But it was a pity that he had classes in the morning, and therefore he had to cultivate in the evening. If not for the long road to the academy, he would have saved a lot of time, so he would need to find the opportunity to take a vacation. But you can't attract attention, and if he is discovered, he will be covered. After such thoughts, Feng Yun took out a pill and before swallowing it, shouted the words 3,000 yuan. The turtle and snake tempering technique, building the foundations like a dormant turtle and like a sleeping snake, absorbing the primordial Kai, tempering the body. 9 days later, Feng Yun, in an abandoned park, began to clench his strength into a fist while thinking that he finally had the strength. And finally he took the first step in cultivation by becoming a pre-master of the initial rank. And he had the last pill of blood Kai left. And as soon as he returns home, he would have dinner first and then feed Lin Qiang several times at the level of a pre-master of the initial rank, and he would like to knock out something valuable to make up for his losses. Returning as a lady, Feng Yun did everything as he thought, and Jing, watching their fight with Lin Qiang, said with a smile on her face that indulgences in teaching, the laziness of the teacher, and therefore she would raise Lin Qiang's cultivation to the pre-master of the middle rank. At the same time, while fighting Lin Qiang, Feng Yun dodging his attacks thought that he was definitely not of the initial rank. It looks like Jing is conjuring again with difficulty behind his back, although he doesn't care about it, because he will still defeat him, because with his current speed and strength, Lin Qiang he is not an opponent. Picking up a small piece of wood, Feng Yun pierced only Qiang's neck with it with great speed and therefore won this fight. Immediately after that, Jing appeared in front of Feng Yun with a notification that he had received a drop, the first level chopping sword technique. And did he want to accept it? Jing immediately started congratulating him, saying that it was a rare drop. Agreeing with her, Feng Yun said with a smile on his face that the chance of dropping a drop really increased. A good loot immediately fell out, and of course he would accept it. After his words, magic began to occur in Feng Yun's head, and to hear a voice that said that the chopping sword would concentrate its power on the sword and therefore it could strike a furious blow. Then images began to appear in front of Feng Yun's eyes. Then Lin Qiang trained with the sword for 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years. Feng Yun immediately asked himself, what is the long-term experience of training chopping sword? Picking up the chopsticks, Feng Yun gathered his strength there, shouting the word, chopping sword, abruptly sent his strength into space, and after that, the chopsticks in his hand broke. After seeing all this, Feng Yun told himself that it was a pity that without a real sword, only half of the power could be used. But now he must be much stronger than Lin Qiang. Having said that, Feng Yun thought again that Lin Qiang was just starting to learn martial arts at the time of projection. Now one can notice the huge advantage of projection. In an instant he received all the experience accumulated by Lin Kang of practicing chopping sword. After thinking about this, Feng Yun punched his fist into the other palm and told himself that he had completely forgotten that there were real swords in the school, and tomorrow he would have to test them. Feng Yun went to the gun shop and wanted to see what their prices were and what they were like in general. After entering and walking a little, Feng Yun stopped and saw that a sword made of molten black iron costs 2,999 yuan. A sword made of steel of multiple hardening costs 19,999 yuan. And a combat sword made of alloy costs 199,999 yuan. When Feng Yun saw this huge amount of money, he was angry and thought to himself that this was a robbery in broad daylight. After selling the pill, he would only be able to afford a black iron sword, and why should he spend money on things that he could get with the help of a mirror? But it doesn't hurt to earn money either. With such thoughts, Feng Yun viciously went to Heilin Martial Arts Academy. After reaching the Martial Arts Academy, Feng Yun immediately went to the equipment room for beginners. After walking a little, Feng Yun took one of the swords in his hands. He began to think about the fact that the cost of this iron sword is 3,000 yuan, but he was not really cared for and therefore his condition is not very good. Junior students are not given due attention. But this sword should be enough to try the power of technology, a slashing blow with a sword. Having finished thinking about it, Feng Yun shouted the word blow, and then sent his power through the sword into the nearest dummy. Feng Yun's strength was so strong that he was able to break not only the mannequin into small pieces, but the sword also broke. Seeing this, Feng Yun spoke discontentedly about what kind of mess it was. After a while, a trainer came into the room for equipment for beginners and seeing a mannequin destroyed into small pieces, he approached him and took one piece in his hands and said that it was a martial art of the first rank, the technique of chopping blow. While asking about it, the coach noticed that something was lying on the table. Looking closer, he saw that there was a broken sword lying there, and a piece of paper that was under a small vase. Taking the paper, the coach read that it was payment for a damaged sword. Right after that, he picked up a small vase and a pill fell out. The coach immediately realized that it was a pill of Kai and blood. Then, taking the sword and looking at it, the coach began to think that it was such a destructive power. But is it possible to achieve such a thing without achieving a level of mastery in the slashing technique? And did Lin Kang do it? Returning as a lady, Feng Yun sadly thought that he had given away his last pill. He would like to come back and get even more. But he can't keep shaking things out with Lin Kang. But there is still a limit on the number of items dropped from one person, so later he will design all the teachers, and then the students. First he will make fun of the students, and then he will challenge the teachers. After a short walk, Feng Yun reached Xiao Lan's work and seeing her, he shouted to her, calling her sister Xiao Lan, that he had come. While saying this, Feng Yun thought to himself that Xiao Lan's sister got a job as a cashier to earn money for an orphanage, and that he could safely attend the Martial Arts Academy. Xiao Lan also saw him, walked up to him and joyfully asked why he was so late today, to which Feng Yun replied with the same smile that something had happened at school. Before he could finish his sentence, a huge black golden eagle suddenly appeared in the sky, which with its loud cry broke all the windows in tall houses. Fragments flew down and crippled people who were in the open space. Xiao Lan almost got hit, but fortunately Feng Yun was able to grab the fragment faster before he hurt Xiao Lan. Throwing out a piece of glass that flowed directly into the trash can, Feng Yun hugged Xiao Lan with a smile on his face and asked her if she was okay, to which Xiao Lan stammered that she was fine. After that, looking at Feng Yun, who was so close to her, she was covered with red paint and thought to herself that he always gave the impression of a weak guy, but now he seems different. At the same time, Feng Yun looked up and saw a huge golden eagle, thought that this is a monster. This is the most common topic he has heard since he found himself in another world. This is a monster, but this is the first time he sees them in person. But if he gets into the main area, the lives of many people will be at risk. With such thoughts, Feng Yun began to run away from the monster, but as soon as he ran a little, he saw how a huge arrow quickly flew past all the people and hit right into the chest of the black golden eagle. The wounded golden eagle fell right in front of Feng Yun, and looking at the black golden eagle in the vicinity, Feng Yun realized that this is a monster of the third rank, a black golden eagle in this world. A monster of the first rank is equivalent to a low-rank martial artist, while the third rank is equivalent to a high-rank martial artist. He is even stronger than a human the same rank, but was killed by a single arrow. Is this really the work of a martial artist? I wonder what rank he is. Thinking about this, Feng Yun received a message from the system that a black golden eagle monster had been discovered. And did he want to project it? At first, you will be surprised at this, but then, overjoyed, Feng Yun thought to himself that he could really project even a dead monster, and of course he would design it. After his choice, Feng Yun saw that the golden eagle was really projected into the mirror, looking directly at him. Feng Yun thought that the projection really worked. It could even copy the monster. And that's just great. Now he became interested in what would fall out of it. After dinner, Feng Yun, while in the mirror, studied about the black golden eagle and found out that he has the level of a monster of the 3rd rank. He is also equal to a high-rank martial artist. Expressed items from him such as feathers of a black golden eagle, flesh and blood of a black golden eagle, and claws of a black golden eagle. Additionally, he has talent low-level winds and combat experience in the forest thicket. After studying all this, Feng Yun said that there were much fewer things than Lin Kang's, but they were all high quality, and therefore he would immediately start on it. After finishing saying this, Feng Yun told Jing that she would put the power of the black golden eagle at the level of a low-rank martial artist. Jing immediately happily did it and then go through that the test was beginning. After her sentence, Feng Yun found himself in the desert with a black golden eagle in the blink of an eye. Feng Yun started to summon the sword that he broke in the martial arts academy, said that he could also model weapons in the mirror space, and he just wanted to practice with the sword. Immediately after this phrase, Feng Yun fearlessly began attacking the black golden eagle, and 10 minutes later, Jing appeared with a notification that Feng Yun had won the battle with the black golden eagle. And since this is the first victory, the drop of the item is guaranteed, and he received items such as the flesh and blood of the black golden eagle. Questioningly repeating her words about flesh and blood, Feng Yun said that he was worried that after he exhausted the Kai and blood pills, he would not have the resources to cultivate. Overjoyed by this, Feng Yun raised his sword up and joyfully shouted to Jing that she would launch another challenge. A couple of hours later, opening his eyes in his bed, Feng Yun said with a grin on his face that after the fight with the Black Eagle, he challenged Lin Kang's projection 5 more times, but he never got anything. Then, after uttering the words about the blood and flesh of the black golden eagle, 10 caskets and 10 vases with flesh and blood appeared in front of Feng Yun. Opening the stopper from the vase, Feng Yun began using magic to separate the flesh and blood. After a couple of minutes, having already done everything, Feng Yun said that now the flesh and blood are separated, and this projection mirror is quite thoughtful. Even the tools are thought out, and now he will first see how the monster's blood will work. After such a phrase, Feng Yun took one of the vases and began to drink, thinking to himself that all monsters are the result of a surge of the primordial Kai of heaven and earth, so their blood is much more valuable than any medicine. After completely drinking the blood of the black golden eagle, Feng Yun abruptly felt terrible pain in his body. With such terrible pain, Feng Yun thought to himself that it seems his body is about to explode. He should recycle all this energy as soon as possible. He used the technique of tempering the body of the turtle snake 10 times. The blood of this black golden eagle is really effective. A small drop is equal to about 5 pills of Kai and blood. With such a source of resources, he will quickly reach the level of a reserve martial artist of high rank. Even Lin Kang cannot afford such luxury as the use of the flesh and blood of monsters for their practice, yet the corpse of a monster comparable to a high-ranking martial artist is worth more than 1,000,000 yuan. Such benefits can only be enjoyed by the elite of great families. While in the deserted forest, Feng Yun trained to use his strength, and after a while, when his training came to an end, Feng Yun happily said that after a month of training, he was about to break through to the level of a mid-level martial artist. Having said that, Feng Yun began to stretch his hands and got tired of saying that it was time for him and the lady to return. Returning home, Feng Yun saw a red-haired guy on his road. The guy also noticed Feng Yun, and when Feng Yun had already reached the guy, they bumped fists, and the guy immediately said that he had not seen him for a long time. Feng Yun, calling him Brother Zhu, asked him if he would come to visit, to which Zhu replied in the negative, saying that since he joined the Floating Cloud Society, the head thinks that he is on the wrong path and constantly makes a face when he sees him. After his words, Feng Yun thought to himself that the head was doing so because it was similar to a gangster underground organization. As soon as he thought about it, Feng Yun asked Zhu about why he had come here then. Smiling, Zhu replied that he had learned several martial arts techniques in society, and managed to become a junior leader, so although he usually had time to look after the shelter, but now there may not be enough time. Having said that, Zhu started to leave waving his hand and continuing to tell Feng Yun that he had heard that he had entered the martial arts academy, so when he mastered the basics, he would be able to teach him a couple of techniques to entrust the care of the orphanage to him. Looking at Zhu's back, Feng Yun thought that this guy was still caring and correct, but unfortunately, at the moment he is weaker than him. After a while, Feng Yun, while in the mirror, asked Jing about whether she could project Feng Yuzu, to which Jing answered him in the negative, saying that he was too weak and there was no point in his projection. After hearing her answer, Feng Yun, fixing his hairstyle, agreed with her, saying that then he would continue to challenge the Black Golden Eagle and Lin Qiang. After his words, Jing immediately asked him if he was tired of fighting with the same ones. Feng Yun replied to her that he would just fight while he was eating, and so he would do two things at the same time to save time. At the same time, when everyone was sitting at the table and eating, Xiao Lan, watching Feng Yun, asked herself, what is wrong with Feng Yun? Because he usually ate food with both cheeks, and today he is worried. The director of the shelter, also noticing that something was wrong with him, hit him on the head, saying that he would focus on food, otherwise he dropped so much food. Feng Yun immediately began to bow to her and asked for her forgiveness. By this time, Jing was congratulating Feng Yun, because he had received a low-rank talent attribute of gold, and this was the most valuable thing that Lin Qiang had. Seeing the attribute, Feng Yun happily said that he had been grinding for a whole month for this. After his words, Jing picked up this attribute, and Feng Yun with stars in his eyes asked Jing if it was true that a martial artist with an attribute is much stronger than an ordinary martial artist, as taught in the academy. Jing also confirmed his words, saying that only one martial artist out of 100 is born with an attribute. What he was not told at the academy is that there are 10 types of attributes: gold, wood, water, fire, earth, thunder, wind, ice, light and darkness, and each of them gives a person different opportunities. After hearing about this, Feng Yun grabbed the attribute from Jing's hands and told her to give it to him as soon as possible. After that, Feng Yun immediately stroked the attribute, and Jing approached him and asked if he had any changes, to which Feng Yun replied that he feels that he has established an incomprehensible connection with the outside world, very vague, and the energy that comes from the circulation of his Qi and blood is much more powerful than before, and that seems to be it. Laughing, Jing snapped her finger, and she and Feng Yun found themselves in the desert, where a black golden eagle was waiting for them. Jing immediately began to say that the attributes of Ri reveal themselves to the fullest if they do not practice the martial art that suits them. The black golden eagle also has a talent for wind, and therefore if he takes possession immediately with 2 attribute talents, then he will be able to rise much higher than ordinary martial artists, so he needs to keep working hard. Agreeing with her, Feng Yun said that if he did not try having such capabilities, he would be no different from garbage. A few days later, Feng Yun, sitting in a meditation pose, joyfully shouted that he had become a middle-rank martial artist. Low-level martial artists can use energy, and a middle-rank master has a much stronger body. Now ordinary sharp weapons cannot injure him, and now he is so pleased to become stronger, and his skin has become much whiter and softer than before. But in his past life he envied people who used expensive skincare products and space needles. With these words, Feng Yun was able to break the iron sword, and after that, starting to go home, he said that now he had to return to the orphanage as soon as possible. Otherwise the director would start scolding him again. Already at night returning home, Feng Yun saw a group of people chasing after one person, squeezing his shoulders. Feng Yun thought to himself that it was better not to pay attention to such things, because they often happen outside the main district. Only God knows which side is good. After saying this, Feng Yun saw that the guy who was running away from the group of people turned out to be Feng Yuzu. Standing behind a tree that was in front of Zhu and a group of people, Feng Yun started counting meters, starting from 30. And when the count came to 10 meters, Feng Yun came out of the tree, quickly headed towards a group of people who wanted to catch Feng Yuzu. After passing by Zhu, Feng Yun was already close to the group of people, but the man who was running in front grinned when he saw him and then pulled out his sword, shouting the word "die" towards Feng Yun. The man pointed the sword at him to attack, but Feng Yun was faster than him, and before the man's sword could touch him, he grabbed the man's wrist very hard, so much so that the man started screaming loudly. But despite this, Feng Yun pulled out his sword, pushed him naked, and then with the sword cut everyone else's throats. When everything calmed down, Zhu came up and asked who it was, but when Feng Yun turned in his direction, Zhu immediately realized that it was Feng. From surprise, Zhu began to ask aloud that he was really still asleep, and where did he come from? To which Feng Yun replied that he could think of it as a dream, as long as he did not report the incident to the shelter. He was not interested in what was happening to these people, as well as why they were hunting him. But how much is this knife that he holds in his hands? Zhu, in a huge shock, replied to him that 50 yuan was probably. After hearing his answer, Feng Yun, starting to leave, threw the knife and said goodbye to Zhu, calling him Brother Zhu so that he would not tell anyone about him. The next day, walking to the martial arts academy in the morning, Feng Yun saw how military vehicles were also heading towards the academy. Seeing them, Feng Yun asked himself aloud, what are these military vehicles? Did soldiers arrive at the academy? After a while, when they got to the academy, all the students gathered at the junior students' practice place, and when Feng Yun entered the hall, he immediately heard the guys talking. One of them called the guy standing next to Brother Chen, asked him if he knew what the military was doing in their academy, to which Chen replied that they were checking junior high school students. Excellent students would be transferred to an advanced class, and the underachievers would be expelled. His father told him about this since the family company does business with the military, but even so, he does not know exactly what the tests will be. The guy who asked the question said dejectedly that this could not be, because he had only been admitted here for a couple of days. The other guy also started saying that if he showed himself badly and was expelled, what would he say to his parents? Another guy asked the question that they want to get rid of them, due to lack of resources. The guy standing next to Chen told him that he was so talented, and even their leader, so he should leave them. At the same moment, two men entered the hall, one of whom was already elderly, and the younger one shouted loudly to everyone, calling them students, so that they would be quieter. After that, the man climbed onto the stage. Seeing him and feeling his aura, Feng Yun immediately realized that he was an expert, and immediately projected him. Once inside the mirror, Feng Yun asked Wu Jing if she had seen. This man is very strong. Agreeing with him, Jing said that he was a real soldier of iron and blood. He would really be useful for his development, so they should project him. After the soldier was copied, Feng Yun found out that his name was Zhu Kunlong. His age was 35 years old. His level was the same, a true martial artist of the middle rank. Items were extracted from him such as the martial art of the first rank hidden blade cutting, the martial art of the second rank fist that overcame the limits, martial art of the second rank palm of superhuman strength, body tempering technique of the first rank 36 types of body tempering, martial art of the second rank inch walking, body tempering technique of the second rank hardness of the golden bell, the martial art of the second rank Buddha's primordial power technique, 2 bottles of Kai and blood pills, a new alloy knife, 2 bottles of healing pills, 1 set of military uniforms, practical combat experience. After reading all this, Feng Yun shouted with a smile on his face that he wanted to challenge him right now. Feng Yun fought with Zhu Kunlong with might and main, but it was useless because Feng Yun could not even touch Zhu Kunlong. Calling Jing a mirror, Feng Yun asked her that she had done something there again. He is now exactly at the level of an ordinary martial artist of the middle rank. And why is he so strong? But as soon as Feng Yun asked these questions, Zhu Kunlong attacked him using the second rank martial art fist that overcame limits. Watching all this, Jing replied to Feng Yun with a smirk on her face that did he really think that simply lowering the level of strength would make his cold-blooded fighter, who had gone through many battles, weaker. When Jing was talking about this, Feng Yun got punched in the face and fell right in front of Jing. Jing continued to ask him, saying that maybe she needed to lower Zhu Kunlong to the level of an ordinary person. Then he would definitely be able to defeat him. At the same time, in the hall where all the juniors gathered, Zhu Kunlong introduced himself to them, saying that he was the main examiner of this assessment. And the content of the assessment is as follows. They specially selected 100 monsters. They will need to be alone or formed a team and defeat one of the monsters, and they will be evaluated based on the results of their battle. As soon as Zhu Kunlong finished speaking, the old man who was standing next to him began to say that the top 2 would be transferred to the senior course, and the first 3 places would also receive Kai and blood pills. Hearing his words, the students began to cheerfully shout that they could go straight to the next course, so they would also give pills of Kai and blood. One of these costs 3,000 yuan. Zhu Kunlong began to look through all the students, and when he noticed Feng Yun trembling with his eyes closed, Zhu Kunlong asked himself why he was so scared just by hearing the content of the assessment. By this time, Feng Yun, being in the mirror, pulled out his sword and wiping the blood from his face, said that he would definitely cope with an ordinary person, and the loss of an item for the first victory is guaranteed, and therefore this is the most reasonable thing to do. But he himself will not be satisfied. With such words, Feng Yun sharply attacked Zhu Kunlong, and was able to injure him in the chest, but Zhu Kunlong did not lose his head, quickly attacked Feng Yun as well, and then using the second rank martial art palm of superhuman strength attacked Feng Yun. At the same time, Chen, with a smile on his face, told everyone, calling them guys, that if they trusted him, they could join him, but the number of seats was limited. After his words, one of the guys immediately replied to him calling Brother Bai that he was so kind, and he was the first in his team. Another one also told him that he also wants to join his team, and he will be the second. Another also said that no one could compare with Brother Bai. Even Feng Yun trembled with fear as soon as he heard that they would have to fight monsters. Another one said with a smile that he was so weak that no one would unite with him, and of course he would be discouraged. Chen, looking at the guys, told them that they would have to dissuade him from participating in this, otherwise he was afraid that he would wet his pants. After saying that, Chen walked up to the trembling Feng Yun and asked him what still hasn't let him go. By this time, Feng Yun had already been able to defeat Zhu Kunlong, and as soon as he did, Jing flew up to him and said that the reward for the first kill, practical combat experience, should she extract it, to which Feng Yun responded positively to her. After a while, when Feng Yun woke up, he saw Chen calling him a pussy telling him to wake up. Angered by this, Feng Yun looked at him very menacingly, so much so that Chen fell to the ground out of fear into the crowd and started shouting at Feng Yun saying that he was a monster. Without staying further in the hall, Feng Yun decided to go outside. After going outside, Feng Yun began to hear the moans of the monster that was being brought inside the academy. Looking after one of the monster trucks and hearing the menacing groans, Feng Yun immediately began to think that this was a shadow cat, a monster of the first rank. It was very fast. His weak point was the back of his neck, and he could understand it by his voice because of the combat experience he had gained. After walking a little more, Feng Yun with an unhealthy complexion thought to himself that he already had a headache from these loud noises. Of course it's good that he got 10 years of combat experience, but he was so tired that he was even afraid to look in the mirror. Because he hadn't slept all night, now his eyes are like a panda's. A couple of minutes later, when he reached the underground entrance to the Equipment Against Monsters arena, Feng Yun, seeing the crowd of guys in front of the stage, thought that he would have to try not to stand out. But here are just youngsters who have never been in a real fight. That they have strength and good skills in martial arts does not mean that they will be able to resist the monster. After finishing thinking about it, Feng Yun stood in front of Chen and looked at him, saying to himself that even this guy is scared right now. By this time, Zhu Kunlong, having climbed onto the stage, began to loudly tell the students, calling them students of this generation, that everyone is weak and has no combat experience. The old man who was standing next to Zhu Kunlong interrupted him, holding a cup of tea in one hand, that it had not been a month since they entered the academy, and they had to fight monsters. In their position they were afraid quite normally. To which Zhu Kunlong replied to the old man that they had no time to wait for them to grow up. After saying that, Zhu Kunlong noticed Feng Yun among the crowd. Because he was not in good shape, his eyes were like a panda's and he looked around without stopping. Seeing him, Zhu Kunlong immediately thought to himself that it was a shame. After that, taking a cup of tea in his hands, he told all the students to get ready to start. Seeing off the students and watching them through the camera, the old man told them not to forget that if they feel they can no longer continue, they can always turn to the nearest instructor for help. But they should keep in mind that as soon as they ask for help, they will be considered disqualified. Walking into the corridor with many rooms marked with numbers, Feng Yun, holding a card with the numbers 24 in his hands, thought to himself that he did not know that there was such a place under the school. Only senior students could use this place and challenge monsters. After reaching the right door and going inside, Feng Yun immediately saw a man on the top, who was behind the glass, and asked him why he was alone. Isn't the purpose of the assessment the exclusion of less intelligent students? Team up quite normally. To which Feng Yun replied with a smile on his face that because he was too weak, no one wanted to team up with him. Calling him a fool, the man told him that he should have given up right away, and why waste his time. Nevertheless, he needed to quickly get a suitable weapon and start. Agreeing with him, Feng Yun after a while changed into a light armor for him and took the right sword. He thought to himself that he would wait a little, and then pretend that he accidentally hit the weak spot of the monster, and now you can start. Having signaled to the man that he was ready, Feng Yun, standing in a pose to attack, thought that a sword of this type had been used by him many times in the mirror space, and was the most effective. Having finished thinking about it, the cage in which the monster was sitting began to open, and Feng Yun began to hear its roar. After that he immediately began to think that judging by the roar, this is an iron-haired boar, a monster of the first rank, which has high indicators of protection and strength, and its weak point is throat. As soon as the boar got out of the cage, Feng Yun heard a voice through the microphone that tells him that this is an iron-haired boar. He is the strongest among the 100 monsters of the first rank, and he is already half a step away from advancing to the second rank, so he can give up before it's too late. Feng Yun immediately asked himself, what and how is it best for him to act out his performance then? After thinking about it, Feng Yun replied to the man that he had said that he would ask for help if he could not win. Right after that, the boar let out a loud roar and its tail turned into 3 snakes. Seeing this, Feng Yun immediately thought to himself that this bastard had just mutated. Then, looking at the man from above and calling him a teacher, he told him that the boar had mutated into a monster of the 2nd rank, a snake-tailed iron-haired boar. To which the man answered him with a very trembling voice from fright, so that he would not be afraid, because someone would surely come to their aid. Hearing his trembling voice, Feng Yun called him a dumbass to himself, thought that he was shaving a boar, even more than himself. While Feng Yun was standing idle, the boar attacked him with his snakes, but Feng Yun was able to easily dodge them. And then quickly heading towards him with a sword, he thought that he would not be able to hide his strength in the campaign, and he did not have time to wait for people to come here to deal with this boar, and fortunately Zhu Kunlong also faced such a situation. The grown snakeheads become a new weak point of the iron-haired boar, and with enough patience, it can be dealt with even easier than before its mutation. With such thoughts, Feng Yun was able to easily cut all the snake heads of the boar and thus defeat him. Seeing this, the man's mouth opened in surprise, and he loudly asked if he really had defeated a 2nd-rank boar. To which Feng Yun looked at him and smilingly replied to him that people are really capable of a lot when they are cornered. Having said that, Feng Yun left the room with all his equipment, and immediately thought dejectedly to himself that he did not know if the examiner would believe in such a thing. But alas, he could not do anything about it, he could only entrust everything to fate. The man, making a report, told himself that Feng Yun had single-handedly defeated a mutated monster of the 2nd rank, and how should he evaluate it? After asking this, the man abruptly remembered that Feng Yun had left, taking with him the issued equipment and weapons. After that, the man caught up with Feng Yun and taking his equipment from him shouted at him that he had to return everything. To which Feng Yun only asked for forgiveness and gave all the equipment. Seeing them, Chen began to ask himself, did Feng Yun really run away without a fight? Although who cares, it will soon be his team's turn, and he will not be afraid of any monsters. After thinking about this, Chen and his team began to enter the rooms and keep thinking that only Yang Tian from the 7th group and Mao Yungsu from the 3rd group could compete with him for the 1st place. Feng Yun was already running away from this subway at this time and happily told himself that he would go to some corner and lie down. After a while, refusing to go outside and lying on a bench, Feng Yun was in the mirror space and talked with Jing that the results would be announced in the afternoon, and before that he would challenge Zhu Kunlong and the Black Golden Eagle several more times. Jing, putting 2 hands on his waist, told him that in her opinion, he was a little arrogant after defeating a mutated monster of the 2nd rank. After lunch, when everyone finished the battle with the monsters, all those who could still stand on their feet ran to see the results. The best in the 8th group, Bai Yunchen, was very surprised by the result he saw and asked himself, how is this possible? The best in the 3rd group, Mao Yungsu, was also surprised and also asked, how is this possible? The best in the 7th group, Yang Tian, was also very surprised and also asked, who is this guy? At the same time, Zhu Kunlong, looking through the results and seeing that Feng Yun took 1st place, found out about him that his name is Feng Yun, and he defeated a monster of the 2nd rank. He is also an orphan without origin. He probably keeps secrets in himself, so he will take him to the army. Upon hearing his words, the old man who had flared up with fire answered him in the negative, saying that he was his favorite disciple. Feng Yun, hurriedly running towards the academy, joyfully thought to himself that today was a great day, although he had challenged only a few times. But Zhu Kunlong's inch-walking techniques and black and gold golden eagle feathers fell to him, and now the results were just about to be announced, right? Having already reached the place where the results were posted, Feng Yun saw a crowd of people and asked himself what was going on there. But when he started to get closer, he heard several people shouting that it was quite obvious that he had cheated. And this is such shamelessness, so they need to talk to the director. Slowly approaching the results, Feng Yun asked everyone who cheated, and who is it? Coming up and seeing that he was in the 1st place, Feng Yun was very surprised. At the same time, Bai Yunchen, Mao Yungsu, Yang Tian went to the director, and when they went to him, they simultaneously called the director. The director, with a smile on his face, asked them what happened, to which Bai Yunchen answered him with a question, saying that the highest grade on the test was S, so why was Feng Yun given SSS rank? Mao Yungsu also asked him that he had been screwed with the results, right? Yang Tian also said that it was unfair. Hearing their words, the man who was sitting opposite the director jumped out of his seat and shouted at them that this was nonsense, and it was not for them to decide whether the results were fair or not. The director, with a calm voice, said that it was reasonable that they thought so he would show them something. Having said that, the director, with the help of magic, began to show the battle that was between Feng Yun and the second-rank boar. Seeing the boar, Bai Yunxin abruptly asked loudly, "What kind of monster is this?" Mao Yunxu also asked the director, "Was there such a monster among the first-rank monsters?" To which the director replied with a smile again that it was an iron-haired boar that had mutated to the second rank right before the assessment. But it only took Feng Yun less than 5 minutes to kill it. After hearing this, all 3 students bowed and began to apologize, saying that he would forgive them for disturbing him. By this time, in the Starlight Base, in the black market of the outer city, Feng Yun, with a backpack on his back and walking through the streets, was thinking that he was not going to skip classes and come here to sell his things. It was just that everyone at school looked at him very strangely that he couldn't keep a low profile. After finishing thinking about it, Feng Yun walked into one of the shops and said to himself that he hoped it was an honest shop. As soon as Feng Yun entered the store, he was immediately greeted by a nice girl and called him a visitor and asked him if she could help him with something. To which Feng Yun replied with a hoarse voice that he had heard that this was the largest chamber of commerce on the black market, and he wanted to sell some monster materials. After a couple of minutes, Feng Yun showed the girl 40 feathers of a black golden eagle, starting to examine them, and after taking one of them, the girl sweetly said that these were the feathers of a third-rank black golden eagle. "This is a good material for feather arrows, which fits better than ordinary material. She can estimate one feather at 10,000 yuan. There are 40 of them here, and they are all in good condition, a total of 400,000 yuan, and what does he think about it?" Feng Yun answered her positively with a hoarse voice. After hearing his answer, the girl immediately told him that then she would need his identity card. Feng Yun immediately pulled out his ID card and gave it to her. The girl credited him with the money and gave it back with words of gratitude that he used their services. After receiving the certificate back, Feng Yun clicked on it, and after that the certificate showed him that he was Feng Yun, a man. His age was 14 years old, his residence address, Starlight Base, Outer City, Zarya Avenue. Orphanage, studying at school, in the initial course of the Heilan Martial Arts Academy. His fortune is 400,000 for whole 7,500 yuan. Seeing how much money he had now, Feng Yun, with a smile and stars in his eyes, said to himself that it was so nice to have money. He had never had so much money on the card in his life. Starting to leave the store, Feng Yun continued to think that later he would anonymously transfer 200,000 yuan to the shelter, so he would help make the lives of the kids better. The next day, approaching the Martial Arts Academy, Feng Yun with a mask on his face thought to himself that as a result, he still came to the academy. Otherwise, he would not have been able to explain himself to the director and Sister Xiao Lan. As soon as Feng Yun thought about it, he was stopped by his teacher grabbing his shoulder and calling his name. Seeing him, Feng Yun in a low voice calling him teacher started telling him that he was too scared yesterday during the assessment, and it seems that because his immunity decreased, he got sick, and therefore he couldn't let him take half a year off. The teacher viciously shouted at him, saying that he believed him, and it was better for him to go with him to the director. After such words, the teacher, holding Feng Yun's hand, knocked on the principal's door and said that he had brought Feng Yun. While Feng Yun was thinking to himself that now he needed to find a way to escape outside the city and start living by hunting and killing monsters. When the director allowed them to enter, Feng Yun was immediately seated at the table in front of the director, and the director began to ask him, "What level is he at now?" Feng Yun replied with a smile on his face that he was at the level of an ordinary middle-rank martial artist. Speaking of this, Feng Yun thought that he wouldn't be able to hide it anyway, so it's better to be honest. After hearing his answer, Feng Yun's teacher repeated his words in surprise, about a middle-rank martial artist. After that he asked him about how he trained like that. The director began to say that the academy values each of its outstanding students, and they have no right to interfere in the personal lives of students. But however, without finishing the sentence, the director offered Feng Yun a cup of tea. Feng Yun asked himself with a shudder that this tea is not poisonous after all. After offering tea, the principal went on to say that after all, the school is relatively simple, but society is much more complicated, and no matter how big the wings of teachers are, they cannot cover the entire outside country, so when he is outside the school, it is better to keep as quiet as possible. Hearing his words, Feng Yun was very surprised. But the director pulled out a large box with bottles inside, with a serious voice, told Feng Yun that this was the prize for first place, Kai and blood pills, and he would give him a week off and then he would be enrolled in the senior course. A week later, Feng Yun was training on the outside of the Starlight base, using his muscles in his arms. Feng Yun was fighting with trees using all his strength, and breaking trees with his bare hands thought that these were the muscles of an ordinary martial artist of the highest rank. The last 3 months he spent most of his time on the grind inside the system, and at the end reached the level of an ordinary martial artist of the highest rank. Then, starting to feel that the body is getting even better, Feng Yun asked himself to himself, saying that this is the original Kai of the attribute of gold between heaven and earth. Does it really strengthen the body? Shouldn't the advantage of attributes be manifested only after reaching the level of a real martial artist? It turns out they begin to appear already at the level of an ordinary martial artist of the highest rank arts. Warriors with attributes autonomously absorb energy corresponding to their own attributes in order to improve their bodies, and it works much more efficiently than pills of Kai and blood or blood and flesh of monsters. However, the initial Kai obtained from one attribute is somehow not enough, so he needs to get more attributes of talents. After starting to leave the training place, Feng Yun happily said out loud that if he received all 10 attributes, he would probably become the only genius in the world. In the walls of the Starlight base, after changing into light armor, Feng Yun began to go beyond the borders of countries and ponder that over the past 3 months he had acquired second-rank martial arts skills, a palm of superhuman strength, a fist that overcame the limits, a second-rank body-hardening martial art, the hardness of the golden bell, and the first-rank sharp golden skill blow. It is worth noting that the attribute skill sharp golden blow can only be practiced at the level of a real master, and he has learned the rest from the system and has already achieved perfection. He also received an alloy battle sword and alloy battle armor. It's time to hunt monsters outside the base. Maybe he will even encounter a powerful monster that he can copy. Seeing Feng Yun, the 2 men who were standing on the wall and watching were surprised, and one of them asked, "Whose child is this? Is he 14 or 15 years old? And he goes out into the wasteland alone?" Another also started asking if he was so ignorant or just fearless. In any case, it's a pity for the person who will be sent to pick up his corpse. The Night Snow Forest located outside the base is inhabited by all kinds of monsters, and the danger here is endless. At the same time, there are also various resources that attract attention, which is why these places are so popular among hunters. Most people buy expensive maps before arriving here to understand the distribution of monsters, but Feng Yun it wasn't necessary, because he had the experience of Zhu Kunlong, who had been here countless times. When killing snakes, Feng Yun thought that this is a first-rank monster, an azure flower snake. The power of its venom is so strong that one bite of it can neutralize any warrior below the level of an ordinary martial artist of the highest rank. But it does not contain anything valuable, and there is no point in projecting it. After killing the snake, Feng Yun went further into the depths of the forest, and after a while he found a huge dead boar, climbed on it. Feng Yun took some of its meat and then went on, but not an hour had passed when suddenly Feng Yun was attacked with an arrow. The arrow was unusual, because as soon as Feng Yun dodged it, the arrow followed him again. Thinking that he would not be able to dodge it, Feng Yun used the second-level body hardening technique, the hardness of the golden dome. With this technique, Feng Yun was able to protect himself. Seeing this, the man who shot at Feng Yun loudly asked, "What is the perfectly mastered hardness of the golden dome?" Feng Yun, with a cold-blooded voice, asked the man where he was looking. After that, he immediately attacked him from behind, so that the man lost consciousness and fell to the ground from a tree. Landing on the ground, Feng Yun said to himself that from Zhu Kunlong's experience in the Night Snow Forest, he realized that in addition to being wary of monsters, it is also necessary to watch out for hunters that lurk in the shadows and can attack at any moment. Then, after starting to search the man and finishing the search, Feng Yun thought to himself with displeasure that he was such a beggar that he had nothing but 3 bottles of Kai pills and blood. Even the equipment was all mutilated. No wonder he wanted to rob him. After such thoughts, Feng Yun abruptly disappeared. 2 men who were watching them came out of the trees, and one of them started asking, saying that this is definitely a 14-year-old boy. He has such terrible skills and a sense of combat. The other, looking at the man lying on the ground, said that he knew this idiot. His name was Liu Guan. He was at the level of an ordinary martial artist of the highest rank. He was a skilled archer and had already killed several hunters before, but now he could not oppose anything. The first man replied to the second that this was normal, because this guy perfectly owns the first-rank martial art, slashing with a sword, the second-rank martial art, inch walking, and the second rank body hardening technique, the hardness of the golden bell. The second one asked him that is it possible to master the second rank body hardening technique perfectly at the age of 14, to which the first one replied that he probably started practicing from the age of 4. Without letting him finish, the second one asked him again, saying that at this age, even the bones are not really formed. How could he begin to improve the body? The first one replied that in any case, they should avoid him, and it's better not to provoke him. By this time, Feng Yun with the huge loot that he had in his bag was already returning back to the base and seeing him and that he was completely unharmed. The two men who were standing on the wall simultaneously thought calling Feng Yun a kid that he had returned alive.